All right, so we're probably gonna have a mix of 2000 series and 1200 series. So it's gonna be a lot of information to cover. It's gonna be fast. We don't have much choices. They don't give us enough time, but I don't want to bore you either. So why are we worried about this? You guys go to your seed corn meetings, your agronomy meetings, you hear about this all the time. On a 17-foot 6-inch stretch, you're missing one plant. That's 7 bushel an acre. You lose that 7 bushel an acre, and times the inputs are what they are, and what the wonderful prices are. You need everything to count. You always do. When it's worth $7, everyone worries about it. When it's worth $3, you aren't as worried about it, but you need to be double worried about it. Your primary drivers, you want to make sure you have your proper seed depth. That is the most critical. Make sure you have your proper seed depth, so you have your proper emergence. Uniform across the planter and throughout the field. Good seed to soil contact. Make sure you don't have any air pockets in there. Make sure you're getting that seed in the right place so you have a good environment for it. Accurate seed population, accurate in-row seed spacing. Now, if you look over the side here, photocopy plants contribute to 9 to 22% of your yield. The picket fence that everyone worries about is lower to like the 2 to 4%. So everyone drives by the road and they're looking at the picket fence, but that spacing isn't as effective on the yield as your photocopy plants. Your timeliness matters. Making sure get that larger, healthy ear, an extra 22 bushel, having the extra 2 kernels around. The length of the ear obviously makes a difference. Your plant that's late, so your uneven emergence. You have a plant that's 1 to 2 leaves behind, it's half a weed. You have one that's 3+ leaves behind, it is a weed. You're pulling down the other ones around it. You look across these, this is pretty close to picket fence stand. Looks like photocopy plants. Pay attention to right there. See how much shorter that plant is. That's a weed. So with that row, it'll probably still produce an ear, but it's going to be a small ear, and it's pulling down the rows on either side of it. It's using nutrients, but it's not effectively raising an ear because it's shielded from some of the sunlight, but it's competing. Picket fence stands or picket fence stands with photocopy plants. You want nice, healthy ears. You want every one of them nice and healthy. You look at those small little stalks there, yeah, raised an ear, but how much tip back did you get because of that? It's tough to calculate it, but fast uniform emergence, fast healthy root growth, accurate in-row seed spacing. Move on, so you've been with Nick and Ryan probably, so you got some experience there, but there are YouTube videos out there for about anything you'd want to do, maintenance-wise, monitor-wise, everything. So go to Case IH North America on YouTube, go to the playlist. There's a huge list of videos there you can find to see what you're doing, to see the steps. Now with our books, we put a lot of time and effort into these books. We've had books for years. Every year, every so many years, we make some updates to it. Trent Schaaf and some of the group from the Humphrey spent a lot of additional time this year updating both of them. This is the information that we get asked about all the time. We put this information together. Yes, we use some pictures in some places from CNH, but it's our book we put together to try to help you guys with information that we know you guys are always asking about. Inside those books, and we're referencing these books because we invested a lot in these books. The cost is one thing, but it's the time we put into them that really cost. But inside, get the right one here. But there's QR codes in there you can scan with your phone. So if you guys know it, take your smartphone, hover over the camera. It should give you a link. Click on it, take you right to that YouTube video to help show you how to do these steps. Both books have some versions of them in there. Use those. This is just a small list of the videos available, but we put those in there just to try to help you along. In each book, there is a checklist. You might know your planter inside and out, but it can inspect 20 planters a year. We use a checklist every time. The reason being, because you're going to miss something. So even though you might know your planter inside out, refer to your checklist. Just scan through it. Make sure you didn't forget about something. Don't forget to start on your tractor, making sure your radiator's clean. These planters use a lot of hydraulic oil, so start making sure your radiators are clean. Make sure they stay clean. Attaching to the planter. Before you attach, make sure you shim your hitch. Make sure you've got your shims added in your hitch. Keep your sway blocks tight. So it might not seem like much movement there, but say you have a 1/2 inch of movement there in your sway blocks, that moves. Now, say you have a 24 planter, all 24 of your openers turned a little angle. That's going to draw the planter this way. Now your hitch goes the other way, it pulls it back this way. Meanwhile, your tractor guidance is getting yanked on the back like that. So keep it shim tight so you don't have that play. I just figure if you grab it, just barely rattle. You don't want it tight, but you don't want it slopping around. And if once you're hooked to the planter, it's a son of a gun to try to shim that. So do it while it's unhooked. Brand new tractor, used tractor, whatever. Year to year, they wear. Keep them shimmed up tight. The 2-point hitch, there's bushing options to add if you have a category 4 to tighten up the pin. One other thing to watch, most tractors, when you hook onto the quick hitch, you're tight to the inside or tight to the outside, which keeps the planter hitch from sliding on your quick hitch. But if yours is not, it's a good idea to add spacers or washers in there to limit that travel, because if it starts sliding around, it'll start doing the same thing we just talked about with the sway blocks. It doesn't move as easily, but if it slides 3 inches one way, now your guess row's off that way, and you hit a hole and it pulls it the other way, now it's off the other way. So make sure that's shimmed up tight so it's not moving around. Hydraulics. So manage your valve settings. So this first one says use your flow control to provide just the flow needed to achieve the results needed. Now that's tongue in cheek. So we used to say on planters to run your flow control just at what you needed to run the function you're running. So you would turn your flow control down until that flow started to drop off. You see your fan speed drop a little bit. Okay, you went too far, go back up a few percent, call it good. The idea was there to save oil, save heat. The problem is that doesn't do that. Your tractor is running on high pressure standby all day, every day anyway. So with that, turn your flow control to 100% on all your motor functions. That way you have full oil going to it. You're not going to be short on oil. Now with the flow control, if you're running on a disc or something like that, you may set your flow control to adjust the raise and lower rate on that. But typically you're going to leave it on 100% on your planter functions. Timers. Obviously, we're not using timers on our motor functions. We need them on constant. But on your raise and lower, I do recommend using timers. Some guys that come from the deer world, they had to power down their planter. When they lowered it, they had to power it down to activate their CCS fan, I believe. Anyway, so they left it powered down. Well, then they come to the red world, and they start blowing seals out of their lift cylinders. Well, the problem is they're leaving it pressure down all the way through the field. Your oil's 200 and some degrees. It'll start damaging those seals. And it historically in my area, it's been the guys that came from a deer planter and like, oh yeah, I had it on constant. Set your timer, so if you forget to return your remote to neutral, extra 2 seconds when you raise and lower it, maybe an extra 2 seconds to phase it, and then have it so it shuts off. There's a learn feature on the Pro 1200s that you can help you learn that if you get into one of them. Motor spool mode. All these later Magnum tractors have a motor spool mode of different variations. So what that is, basically to activate it, you put your lever to float, you activate the motor spool mode. When you pull the lever back, it'll only go to your forward position. You no longer have neutral. The idea is there is when you go to shut it off, you can't go to neutral, you can only go to float. Reason for that is when a fan motor, if that fan's spinning 3,000 RPM, you shut that remote off, that motor becomes a pump. It's pushing oil. It's got to have somewhere to go. So on older equipment that might not have a bypass valve, that oil's got to go somewhere. So they have motor spool mode, so you have to go to float so it coasts. Thing is, on these planters, they're built with recirculating check valves. Basically, safety's built in. So you could shut that lever off. The fan's just going to stop, and it's going to coast anyway because it's got those valves. I still recommend going to float, but I would recommend not messing with the motor spool mode because all it adds is extra steps. Because every time you start the tractor, you got to kick it out of motor spool mode, move the lever back to neutral, then put it back forward, put it in motor mode. It's extra steps. You don't need that. Just try to remember to put it in float. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. Now, if you go to some dry spreader cart, that might burn you. But if you're on a red planter, you don't need to worry about that. So you just limit it some of the time you spend switching your levers around. Priority. These later Magnum tractors do not have a priority valve. So it doesn't matter which remote you're hooked to, they all share the same oil flow. Now, if you're a good example is a boxcar Magnum. Number 1 remote is your priority. So if you put the raise and lower on number 1, you got 100% flow, you're going through the field, your vacuum's doing its thing, you go to raise the planter and your vacuum shuts off because you sent all the oil through your priority remote to raise and lower the planter. So what I usually try to do if we're hooking to a boxcar Magnum is try not to use number 1. If you got, if you only need 2 remotes, you got 2 and 3, use them. If you do have to use number 1, you need to get your flow control working so you can adjust your flow down to just what you need so there's still flow available for the other function. You don't want your vacuum shutting down every time you raise the planter because now it's got to prime up. If you don't prime it, you're going to take off through the field and it's going to leave a gap till it primes up. So that's something critical there. Now, like I said, the MX Magnum tractors do not have a priority valve. They all share the same oil. If you have an instance where you activate a function and it kills the other remotes, you have a signal check problem. It's not supposed to be like that. You need to get it fixed or switch some remotes around to not use that one. So that is such a thing where it'll kill other functions, but it's not because you have priority valve, it's because you have a signal check problem. This is for a 12 or 16 row 2150. Your book for whatever planter you have should have a chart just like that in there, shows which hoses run which functions. That is very helpful to know. Now, all the planters use the red hoses for your raised lower. So the red hoses meaning the little rubber caps on there. If those caps break and fall off, get new ones or get zip ties that are color coded to match. Because if you call someone and you're like, I can't raise my planter, they're going to ask you, have the red hoses hooked up? And like, well, I don't know. They don't have caps on them. It's like, this is going to be a long day. So those colors matter. The red ones are most important. Beyond that, I really don't care about the color so much as keeping them matched. So you got, 2 yellow hoses or 2 green hoses, make sure they're staying together. I've had instances where guys lost the caps, they got hoses switched. I had a guy yesterday I was talking to, had his 24-row planter hooked up, and he was just test running. He couldn't get either vacuum fan, air compressor, alternator, none of that would run unless he had both remotes engaged. Well, he had his hoses crisscrossed. So he said it only works if I have both levers on. If I shut one of them off, no matter which one it is, nothing works. And I spent a long time trying to explain. I don't know if he still quite understood. I think he just kind of was like, well, I just have to have them both on anyway. But I'm sure he had a hoses swapped. Because if you have a lever in neutral and your return is hooked through that neutral, it's not going anywhere. That's just a dead head. So keep those matched. Years ago when we used to mess with flow controls all the time trying to balance it, that really messed with people. Because if you had one remote at 45%, one at 60%, they're returning through the other remote, it's still restricting. So when we're on 100% on all of them, it doesn't bother so much. Just try to keep them matched. Case drain coupler. That's your most critical connection. You got should be a little tag on it that tells you, reminds you to hook it up. That should be your first one you hook up, the last one you unhook. Starting in 21 and after, some of the planters have a motor return coupler. So you'll still have all your regular Pioneer couplers, but you have one hose with a big motor return coupler. That's just to try to get the return oil back into the tractor with a little less friction, get it back to the pump, get it circulating again. So you will have some planters have that. If you don't have that coupler, we need to discuss options there. Case drain, I said it's the most important connection. If you do not have this knurled type fitting here, I recommend getting it. The original ones were kind of a smooth one, and you plug the hose in, you wiggle it, it can pop out. This is a locking type. You have to slide the coupler. In my opinion, that case drain hose should break if you forget to unhook it. It should not just pop out, because if it comes unhooked, you will blow up fan motors. The only exception is on the 2000 series, there's a pressure sensor that'll kick the fans out if it exceeds that pressure. And you hope it kicks out soon enough. But that case drain, if you don't have that style on a Magnum, if you go to add it, you need an adapter. Just a threaded adapter. Easy to change, but you'll need that threaded adapter. Those couplers can go bad where they won't latch, but they've been 100 times more reliable than the previous one. Your hydraulic return, I talk about your motor return. Most of these tractors, these are not marked. If you have Power Beyond, you've got 2 big couplers. If you just have motor return, you just have 1. Older tractors, they had an R or P or something stamped on them. You tell what they are. Later ones, they don't. You can look in the book. It'll show you a picture. One thing that one of my guys told me, it makes sense. When you're running motor functions on a MX Magnum, the return hose is the inside coupler. That's where you want your bigger hose, your return hose, whether it's a 1250 or 2150. Well, that's in line with that motor return, so that's a little easier way. Your return hose, your bigger hose, that's where you go. That's your case drain one on MX Magnum. If you have a John Deere, it might be down off the side, down lower. 80, a boxcar Magnum, you're going to have to add something in there. Whatever that is, you want zero pressure return. That case drain, that is a very low flow, so less than 5 gallons per minute. I've had guys that try to hook up some air cart or something. They just want something to dump oil. Do not send it back through your case drain unless it's meant to be the case drain, because that's a low flow situation. So I've had guys ask for that. Just limit that. Now that is just dumping right back into the transmission here, but the coupler's just not designed for high flow. Pump configurations. So historically, most MX Magnums in our area have been ordered as high flow, but there's going to be a lot of other options out there. So the first starts off with a standard flow. Single pump that supplies all the remotes, about 44 gallon per minute at the couplers, although you're not going to get that at the couplers. That's more of what the pump puts out. But that'll run a 12 or 16 row planter, but you're not going to run a 24 row without a PTO pump with it. Go to the high flow, still single pump, 59 gallon. You're not going to get that out of the couplers again on that, but you can run a 24 row planter without a PTO pump. When it gets tricky, you get the twin flow, dual pump configurations. So where it's so tricky is one pump runs one stack, the other pump runs the other stack. The first pump can be a 44 or 59 gallon, the other one's a 30. Now, I have hooked up a lot of planters over the years, and if it works, I've hooked all the hoses on the same side. If it's 3 remotes, that way all your hoses are there, nice clean. You run your harnesses on the other side, nice and clean. Until you go to a twin flow, most twin flows have the 44 gallon per minute pump on this side. So now that is not enough flow to run everything. Plus you got this other pump not even doing anything. So you need to know whether you have a twin flow or not, because that makes a difference in how you hook it up. You're not going to have enough flow to run a 24 row over here. If you have the 59 gallon one, you would, but you're still kind of limited. Move a function over here, use this other one. If you just have the standard flow or high flow, it doesn't matter. But that's where you just need to know whether you have twin flow or not. And there's not a good, easy way to just look at the tractor and know. If you're going to ask me, I'm going to want your serial number, put it into the system, and it'll tell me how it's built. That's the easiest way to tell. Yes, you can crawl around and get under there and look, but you can't see the pump real easy. So anyway, just know whether you got twin flow or not. Then move to this chart. You got your twin flow. So this is just your twin flow pump, your 30 gallon per minute pump. You know, you compare it, standard flow, high flow, or the two options of the twin flow, whether you have the high flow or the standard twin flow or the mega flow. So you can see there that relationship. You know, the twin flow, you have way more oil, but if you're not moving your hoses to the right spot, you're going to be limited on what your flow is. Hitch settings. So they always say toolbar level. What I'm worried about is your row unit level. So that 1200 series row unit's really easy to tell. It's got that nice flat red frame on top. And you want to check that while moving through the field. So you need someone walking or riding a four-wheeler alongside you, because you come to a stop, everything kind of sets back. When you get going ahead, you'll notice historically what you'll see is that row unit's nose diving. 1200 series row unit, you'll be lifting your closing disc out of the ground. Harder the ground, the worse it is. So you're saying my closing disc isn't working, so you buy all these other attachments trying to get it to close. Well, your closing discs aren't even hardly touching the ground. You raise that hitch, roll that back so the row unit's level. Now your closing's doing something. It's not as critical on the 2000 series because there's a lot more travel to the components. So that gives you a little more leeway. And it's a little tougher to tell if these are level because it's just not as obvious. You can look at the red cast frame, get an idea. But make sure you're moving when you check it, especially on the 1200 series. That can contribute to your seed depth. We used to run a lot of Groff fertilizer openers up in the Atkinson area, where pretty much everyone just dribbles out the back now. But those Groff openers, that row unit start tipping forward. Now that Groff is trying to go 4 inches in the ground, it's not gonna. It's holding the row unit up. You adjust your seed depth as deep as you want to go, but the gauge wheels are just bouncing. Of course, that was before we had much for technology to tell us that the gauge wheels didn't have ground contact. And our closing isn't working. So our depth sucks, our closing sucks, all that. Well, once you finally look at it, well, you tip that row unit back. Now the fertilizer's not trying to go 4 inches. It's trying to go the 1.5 inches, 2 inches, whatever. Now your seed's going the 2 inches and your closing's doing a better job. So watch that. Everyone asks me, well, what percent do I need that set at? And it's like every tractor is different. Different hitch configurations, different quick hitches, different lift lengths, different tractors, different tires, different calibrations. So no percent is the same. You can't call your buddy and say, well, he's at 44%, I got to be at 44%. No, adjust it to where the row units run level through the field. Remember that percentage so when you switch fields, you know where to set it back to. The 2000 series planters, the 24 rows, don't have as much clearance out there on those end rows for transporting between fields. The 1250s, 1255, 24s had a little bit more. Part of that, there's a lot more row unit travel. Actually, that's the main part. There's a lot more row unit travel. The toolbar is higher, but it still doesn't quite make up for it. So it's easy to drag rows, in and out of fields, across railroad tracks. You know what's going to win there. If you hit a railroad track, one of these, it's going to just peel the rubber off of those. Hopefully, I guess you don't want to derail the train, but there's a raised row option. It's a little add-on harness. It's just the 2000 series, but it's an add-on harness. It can be added. It's a little over $100 for this harness. fairly simple to put on. It involves pinning some wires in, so if you're capable, you can do it yourself. Otherwise, you may need to hire someone, but that is an option, where then it gives you an option in your frame functions to raise rows. And it'll raise all the rows, but it'll only for like 60 seconds and only at a low ground speed. So you need to be ready. If you're at a intersection or turn into a field, get there, raise them up, get across there, and then they drop back down. It's going to give you a lot more travel, but it's not meant for high-speed run down the road. Those cylinders are maxed out trying to lift that road unit, so you don't want to be carrying it that way. Bulk fill control. So we'll talk more on the manifold itself, but to start with, the standard default setting is 3,000 RPM. People ask me, how high can I go? You can go to 4,500, whatever it'll go to. But keep in mind, sometimes you get too much airflow volume in there and it holds the seed up. So that might not always be the answer to raise your speed up. Typically 3,000, you don't need to go lower than that, but just be recognizing you can adjust that. Now, one of the main questions we get during the season, you're planting through the field, you have a row that quits planting. You go back there, you take the seed hose off, and there's no air coming out of it. Well, now I know why it's not planting. I'm not getting air out there. So you call us, like, my bulk fan's not running. It's like, well, what did you do? Well, I stopped and raised the planter. Well, you raise the planter. Bulk fill has the headland auto mode. It always defaults when you start up the tractor the first time. When you start it up, it defaults. So when you raise the planter, it shuts the bulk fill off. Well, you can't hear that because your vacuum fans are still on. So you're back to, well, my bulk fan's not running. You finally figure out it's not running. Well, you just shut it off because you raised the planter. So that's probably not your problem. If that was your problem, you'd have your whole planter not planted, not just that one row. So you can hit that button. It'll run all the time then until you cycle key, then it reverts back. It's typically never an issue. You guys might have ran that way for years and not even known it. It's the issue when you go to raise it to go back and figure out why you're not getting seed. That's why. Alternator, same way. Honestly, I'm not sure. I think it reverts the other way to where it stays running all the time. But you can adjust it. I would leave the alternator speed at the default setting. Some of them are set at different speeds. I would just leave it where it's set. Underneath that alternator on all the 2000 series, if you have one, is that red box that has a battery in it. If you got 2000 series and it's been setting all winter, get a battery charger on that, charge it up a little bit. Because if you go to the field, you kick your hydraulics on, it'll come up and say your alternator's not turning. Well, it might be turning, but there's not enough juice in the battery to excite the alternators, and without the alternator being excited, it's not going to show any speed. So then you're out there jumper cables trying to charge the battery enough that it'll kick everything in. So just handy beforehand, just charge the battery a little bit, make sure it's good. It's a regular Magnum battery with a threaded top post, so nothing special about the battery. If you're a few years old, maybe replace it. But that's a first day type deal, guys. Get out there and alternator's not running. It probably is, just low voltage. Now with the 2000 series also, once that alternator starts running, all the power is pulled off of that alternator and battery. There's no power being pulled from the tractor. So if you're, instead of trying to run all this electrical stuff on a tractor alternator that you turn the lights on at night and it's getting maxed out, this is self-sufficient. If you put precision stuff on a 1200 series planter, you put V drives, you can add an alternator on that, and we strongly recommend that. It is just supplementing. There's no battery. It's still working with the tractor, but it's supplementing. And if you don't have a V drive planter, with the precision on it, you really don't need the alternator. It's not that much load. Bulk fill. So if you're having one side of the planter not getting seed more so than the other, first thing I'd check is your tank lid. Make sure the latches are tight. Make sure your seal is good. From there, we always recommend cleaning out your bulk fill manifold. Now, the 1200 series is a lot more forgiving as far as cleaning it out, but it's probably more important. The shutoffs don't necessarily work as good on the 1200 series planters to shut that seed off. So once you get to the field and you have to shut your seed flow off, it's a little tougher. The 2000 series, they got this rubber plug here that you pop out, and then the steel strap slides in to shut the seed off. Works pretty slick. But before you go to the field, take a blowgun and blow it out really good. Now, one thing we found on these 2000 series, and this is new to us, so we really kind of overlooked this in the past. This is a picture of Nick's planter. He took these himself when we got back from a training where they told us about this. He went and took his planter apart and looked in there. So we got these little holes that are plugging. Now, in this instance, you could take the hose off, and this is just 2000 series, but you go out to the road unit, take the hose off, and you're getting good airflow out there, but no seed. Well, this is the hole where your air goes through. Your big hose hooks up here. big hose hooks up here, blowing air out those holes out to the rows. These holes down here, though, that seed is falling down in there, and it's lifting that seed up for these holes to blow it out. So you don't have, if these are blocked, you don't have the lift to get the seed up where it needs to be to blow it out. So you can see it real good on this manifold right here. You can see that screen. It's real easy to get to a blowgun. You may need to take a pick and clean it out. The problem is when you just blow it out, you just put it back in here. So when you kick the bulk fill fan on, you just shove it back up there. So take this hose off, take a shot back, clean that out real good. Do that before you go to the field. 1200 series, you don't have that screen, but still get in there every nook and cranny. You know, you'll get some chunks of seed treatment or who knows what else in there. Get that out of there. This diagram shows a little more on this 2000 series how that seed is flowing, how the air is flowing. So you've got your airflow going straight out. Your seed, and you can't really see how that works by this diagram, but your seed is dropping down the bottom. This little airflow here is bringing seeds up for that air to blow out. Now, the immediate thought is, why doesn't the seed just gravity flow to here and blow out? It'll bridge up. So they have it designed not to prevent the bridging, but then you have to lift that seed back up. So if you have a 2000 series, I said this is new information for us. We all felt pretty ridiculous when we didn't know about it, but right afterward, came back, Nick went and took pictures of his, and like, oh, yep, there we go. Fertilizer pumps. We do not have a diaphragm pump on display here, but I have a slide showing it. But on the centrifugal pumps, the old original centrifugal pump, that the ACE pump that everyone's seen and used for years, the later ones are a wet chamber pump, so they've got an oil bath in here and air pressure to it also to help keep that fertilizer out. So I recommend changing that oil every year. There's a sight gauge there. That oil is the clear jug there, and it's like 62 bucks a quart. It's expensive, but it is a recommended ACE. It's a barrier fluid. It's not really a oil like you would be used to, but recommend using the correct oil on that and changing it every year. Air it back up when you're done. You got your pressure gauge there to air it up to. The diaphragm pump, it's got oil in it too. That uses a 30 weight non-detergent. We got a jug of that over there. 30 weight non-detergent, change it every year also. If your oil starts getting cloudy or anything like that, you got fertilizer in there or wear and tear, get it changed. And one thing I'll point out, this is the 30 gallon per minute pump. The 20 is similar, but if there's oil in this sight glass, it's full. Even if the oil is just at the very bottom, the pump is full, because the pump is full up to there, that's excess. So I tell you guys, if your oil is just a little low but you can see it, don't shut down the plant or make a trip to town to get the oil. Just get it for tomorrow. But if you can't see the oil, now you don't know where it's at. Now, if your oil starts overfilling, that means you're getting fertilizer in there. You need to stop now, because that fertilizer will eat that pump alive. Now, if it's filling up or you're leaking oil out of it, there's the rubber diaphragm. Here's for a 20 gallon per minute pump, there's 2 of these. A 30 gallon per minute pump, there's 3 of these. But it'll crack out. I've seen if guys were pushing fertilizer too hard with a 3-inch pump and they're really pushing it, I've seen them unseat these. Pretty rare. But it can, just because they're trying to fill the tank too fast and hard. But typically they'll crack out. One sign is a leak of oil externally. When they start getting fertilizer in the oil, you need to stop and get this figured out right away. On the 20 gallon per minute pumps, something to be checking, this little external rubber baffle. If it leaks, you'll be leaking fertilizer. It doesn't hurt anything, so it makes a big mess. So if you have a 20 gallon per minute pump, and it looks similar to this one, only it's just got 2 plungers instead of 3. But I usually recommend keeping one of these on hand. They're really cheap, but real expensive when you got to drive 20 or 30 miles to go get one. Air pressure. So in the diaphragm pump, you don't have a pressure gauge to determine the air pressure. They want 25 to 30 psi. What I like to do, I got a little air pressure regulator set up, and I'll adjust it with a gauge. I'll get it adjusted up to 25 psi with a tire check on it. That way, just hold it there a little bit, pull it off, put the cap on, call it good. If you go to put a pressure gauge on there to check it, you just let half the air out because it holds like that much air. So if it loses air, it's not super critical, but it should have some air in it. Same with this pump. You got a gauge there so you can monitor that. It does not hold much air. Air compressor options. So I'm sure we got a mix of 1200 series and 2000 series, so you probably have all these pump options depending on what you have. Starting over here, you got your clutch control pump, or if you have in-cab down pressure, you got your filter. Some guys will remount that filter, run a hose up into the cab so it's pulling in clean air. I would strongly recommend that. Just make sure the hose doesn't get pinched or get a hole cut in it. But that'll prolong the life of that pump. That pressure switch there is the highest maintenance part, in my opinion. This particular one is kind of cracked and got moisture in it. The reason it's unplugged is because when he was bringing the planter into our shop, he's fueling the tractor up, and you hear that compressor just running nonstop, and it's blowing the relief valve off. So he just unplugged it. Those terminals over the winter, rusted, whatever. So that's the most common maintenance item there. A lot of them have a pressure gauge here, but some of them have the in-cab pneumatic down pressure, and then they got a sensor that's reading them on the display. This is the old down pressure only black little pump, and it had the little switch where you manually just held the switch to air up the pressure, and then you dump it off there. Some guys would run a wire up in the cab so they could run it from the seat. It's just got a small little filter. These really don't go bad because they really don't do much. They don't automatically cycle, whereas that one's automatically cycling. Here's the pump, the factory hydraulic pump on the 2000 series. It's got oil in it too. Change it every year. It's a 1550 engine oil. It's going to get dirty from condensation, dust, whatever, but change it. It's less than a quart. Change it. 2 air filters. You got your intake filter here, and then your recirculation, or your vent filter. So on the closing cylinder on these, they have the pneumatic closing. It's a one-way cylinder. So the other line, but there's 2 hoses hooked to it. The other line is going back as a breather to this filter. It's vented up to here, so it's getting clean air. So that's why there's 2 hoses, because the one's coming up here to breathe. So check both of those filters. Now this flat one here is your return one, your vent one, and sometimes you'll find dirt in that. There's different ways it can happen. We can have cylinders fail, that's pulling dirt internally, or those white and blue hoses right where he's pointing there will wear on each other. And it's usually right up inside that plastic where you can't see it. They'll wear on each other, get super thin, you'll start getting dirt in there. And usually before you have an air leak, you have a vent leak, and so you're pulling in dirt. So be watching that. The only good way to check that is about that plastic deal right under where his hand is. You have to pop it up and slide it a little bit to look. But those hoses, if you grab that closing arm and go up and down, it kind of cycles. I've noticed some planters that didn't have trouble, and it was ones where we shoved a fertilizer hose there through also. That tightened it up. Now it can't move. So just by accident, some of them we've corrected because it just got tight enough it couldn't move. And then it flex the hose down below, but that doesn't seem to hurt anything. So something to be watching there. To replace that hose, that's kind of a project. You got to drop the cylinder out to get at the fittings. You got to pull the hose through, so it's something to do in the shop, not out in the field. Delta force, if you have hydraulic downforce, like the 2000 series, typically all come from the factory with hydraulic downforce. The ground contact is your most important function from that. You're getting your consistent seed depth. So if you just have airbags or springs, if you don't have a 2020 or something in the monitor, you really don't know what it's doing. The kind of rule of thumb is with those, if you come to a stop, don't let the planter roll back. Try to just stop and throw it in park. Let the planter go down, go back and kick the gauge wheel and see if it turns. If it just sits there and spins, you don't have enough. If it won't move, you get too much. If it just spins a little bit, you're probably about right. That's about all you can do other than checking your depth. But if you have hydraulic downforce that's adjusting all the time, we got a graph here we're watching, and we're wanting to make sure our ground contact, 91.7, that's not good. You want good gauge wheel contact because that's showing you're on the ground. I talked about that 1200 series row unit nose diving and those gauge wheels bouncing. If you don't have a 2020 in there with load cells, you have no way of knowing that unless someone's riding along beside and it's like, yeah, they're not doing their job. So that ground contact is important. Now, if you have a 2000 series or a 1200 series with Delta Force, you got your downforce control settings, your light, standard, heavy, custom. So ultimately, you only need 1 or 2 pounds of gauge wheel contact. So margin. If this gauge wheel runs over my foot, you only need 1 to 2 pounds really, because that means your seed is full depth and you got some weight on your gauge wheel. Reality-wise, you're going to need a lot more than that because I kind of view it as a semi climbing a hill. Do you hit that hill at 5 mile an hour or 80 mile an hour? So if you're only at 2 pounds, that delta force can't respond quick enough to keep your row unit in the ground because there's variables, there's little clumps, there's everything. You hit it in the heavy setting, you've got 100 and some pounds of margin on it, you're going to bridge across those. So I guess I always recommend having excessive downforce. If you don't have load cell to give you a readout, you can run extra, and you're not going to adversely affect your stand on a red planter like you could some other brands because of a reduced inner diameter gauge wheel. So that if you look towards the center of the gauge wheel, towards the inside of the row, that's got that relief in it. That helps to prevent packing that soil right there. So you basically, it's putting the weight outward further, and that's carrying your gauge wheel. So I always tell people, data has proven that your downforce is, yield results. So keep your downforce there. If you don't have a reading on it, err on the side of too much. Bushings, parallel link bushings. This just pertains to the 2000 series. The earlier ones had a poly bushing with a steel one on the inside. There's a couple different variations of that. They now have gone to a steel on steel, and that is an oil impregnated steel. It is special. They've done a lot of testing on it. So new planters built now going forward have that new style bushing. If you're replacing them, and I recommend checking them, the bottom link is what will wear the worst, and if they get worn through the poly, they wear into the link, they'll ruin the link. Then you're buying that whole bottom link. So be checking them. But if you change them, yes, these are more expensive, but you're going to get a lot better life out of them. So it'd be something to be checking on your planters on 2000 series. The 1200 series, they're pretty forgiving. Those arms will wear more than the bushing. Yeah, I've had guys buy all new parallel links, but at what point are you needing to? It's tough to say. But on the 2000 series, where there's a lot more row unit travel, you got to watch that a lot more. High speed on these 2000 series, people going high speed, you got that row unit moving so much more. There's a lot heavier row unit, there's more force on it. We see a lot more bushing problems. But look at what that planter is doing and capable of doing too. Row cleaners, there are countless options. We got the Yutter floating row cleaner here. This is standard typically on all the red planters. There are, from the factory, there are some options. Basically, I think one other option. But aftermarket, there's countless options. But no matter what it is, checking your blades, checking your bearings, if you have a clean sweep, checking that rubber boot, making sure that boot's in good shape, because that keeps the dirt away from the cylinder ram, which can start getting pulled in the cylinder. Check your air lines. Right up here, that zip tie can break. Those lines can rub, or they can get out and caught by stalks, so be checking that, following that up. There are bushings on these floating row cleaners in the back. Change them to keep your travel, protect your arms. If you get too much travel in there, start to egg out the arms, you may at some point have to replace them. So be looking at those bushings at the back. Wear opener components. Do not let your openers turn into this. Typically we go by measurement, not by flat sides. So I got the specs over here for the 1200 series and the 2000. Starting with the 1200 series, the opener is brand new, or 14-inch shot or 13.5. You jump down to the 2000, it's 15 inches new and 14.5 shot. Now either way, if you just put openers on last year, and say your 14-inch openers, you put them on last year and you're 13 5/8, yeah, they're above spec. What are they going to be by the time you're done planting? They're going to be shot. So keep that in mind. Where will they be when you're done planting? Be proactive on that so you don't have a beautiful day like today and you're sitting there at the corner of the field putting opener blades on, and you would have got done before the rain that's coming this weekend. So be looking at that. Sometimes by the time that wear is getting down to that mark, bearings start to get a little loose too. And I have found if you have a row that's plugging just worse than the others, and you've tried shimming in and out, check that bearing, because sometimes just a little wobble in there for whatever reason. It seems like you would think you should be able to shim it out of it. It doesn't always do that. It'll plug. So if you have one with a loose bearing, that's your culprit. So sometimes the opener might not necessarily be completely shot, but your bearing's getting loose. There is a new 2000 series blade that's a harder, longer life blade. It just came out this year. It costs a little bit more. It could be an option, but me personally, I'm concerned about the bearings not holding up, and you've spent another $10 on a blade. The 1200 series, there's 3.5 mils, 4.5. I don't know, there's like 3 or 4 different thicknesses. In our area up there, we typically just go with the 3.5 millimeter blades, the thinner ones, because the bearings and everything are going to be gone about the same time. I've got some guys up in South Dakota, different soil type, they like the thicker ones. Your firming point and seat shoe, they should be replaced anytime you're doing openers. I don't care even if they look good. You should be doing them. Now this is excessively worn on the seat shoe. The side of the seat shoe on the leading disc side is one that'll wear the most. So I have had guys that when they do openers, like it isn't really completely shot yet, you can take that, put it on the other side, wear out the other side, because one half the planter left leading, one half is right leading, so opposite sides wear. If you're going to go through all the work, usually the point isn't too bad. The shoe is what wears first. When you buy them, you can buy them as a kit, do that, replace them both. Even though the point isn't too bad, where is it going to be by the time you're getting halfway worn with the new blades? The 2000 series has got a little different design on the point and shoe, and we really don't see much wear on them. More of the wear we'll see is on the side, just from dirt buildup and hard mud compacting in there. I usually tell guys maybe every other time you do openers, replace them on the 2000 series. Now the seed disc scrapers, 1200 series, I usually tell guys, it's just lefts and rights. Grab a handful of each. When you're going through them, just replace as needed. You go to the 2000 series, you're probably going to need to do the scrapers every time you do the blades. And they might not be completely shot. They're not going to make another life of a blade. Now, seed disc scrapers on the 1200s, left and rights. The 2000 series, you got left leading, left trailing, right leading, right trailing. You got 4 different part numbers. And if you just take them all off the whole planter and put them in a pile, you're going to have a hell of a time. So I always tell guys, if you're going to tear the whole planter down, start in the middle. All the right-hand stuff goes to the right side. All the left-hand stuff goes to the left side. Same with gauge wheel arms. There's left leading, left trailing, right leading, right trailing. You go back together and you got some of those switched around, it's going to be really goofy. Your depth's not going to be right, I guarantee it. So keep track of those. Keep all your left stuff on the left side, right stuff on the right side. Those scrapers, like I said, just plan on replacing them every year. Seed disc openers, the gap, 1/16 to an 1/8 inch is what I recommend. So if they're too tight together, they wear on each other. If they're too large of a gap, they'll get dirt in between them and it's harder on the bearings. So the reason they wear on each other, we got leading, trailing design. The discs are turning exact same RPM, but you look at that point of contact. This tip of this blade is turning faster than this back here further is. This tip's turning the same speed, but you're back here. So that's why they wear. They're turning at different speeds. If they were matched up like a deer, they're not going to wear on each other because they're turning together. But our leading, trailing design, so that's why if you get them shimmed too tight, they're going to wear on each other excessively. Other thing that'll do it is in hard ground, when you got delta force and you're pushing down really hard, it's going to flex those together no matter what. That's why we kind of shoot for that 1/16 to 1/8. You're allowing a little bit of gap without too much. If you, like I said, you get the bigger gap, you can let a little more dirt in for plugging, harder on the bearings. Now, if you do openers, say every 3rd year, you have to replace openers. Before season check, you might just need to go through and reshim them. If you get one season out of openers, and I've got a lot of guys that cover enough ground, they do, you get down the tail end, and you might find yourself stopping and reshimming a couple just because they start plugging. So reshim as needed, but that 1/16 to 1/8 inch. Gauge wheel arms, pretty forgiving. Just make sure they can run up against the seat opener disc, not hard, but just lightly rub up against them. Shim lightly. If you came from the deer world, those had to be really critical, had to be very tight because they're a pusher type, and they would wedge and plug. The case one is a lot more relaxed, so not near as critical there. On the scrapers, I was talking on the scrapers on the 2000 series, there is an option to add an internal scraper between the opener discs, and there's a kit that you can get where it's 4 rows, 2 lefts, 2 rights, where I said there's left leading, left trailing, right leading, right trailing. There's 4 different part numbers. To have a kit, they did it so each kit has 4 rows, 2 lefts, 2 rights. So on a 16-row planter, you need 4 kits. Those parts can be gotten through the parts department, but the kit comes through the whole good side. And it's a little cheaper to get the whole kit. Now the problem with it is ordering wise, it takes a little longer. We don't have quite as much visibility on it. So if you're thinking about it, right now the price on those kits is $522 for 4 rows. So if that's something you think you might want, be talking to your guys about it. We really haven't ran many of them. We did get a couple planters in Atkinson this year that we didn't actually order. They were ones that Case had built, and they sent them to us and told Jake and all these guys to just sell them. Gauge wheel options, I was talking about the flat profile and the reduced inner diameter. Another option is spoked gauge wheels. If you have a lot of trouble with mud packing on the inside, you can try spoked gauge wheels. I did have one guy tried some in no-till. He does strictly no-till. He tried a set. He ran 2 different quarters, and he just bought 4 of them. He brought them back. He's like, here, sell them for me. I don't want them. He had trouble stalks getting shoved in there from the sides. So that was one example where they didn't work. Disc drills, guys love the hell out of them. Or some other guys in heavier soil like them on the planters, just so they're not plugging up. So with that flat profile gauge wheel, if there's a case option for that flat profile gauge wheel. And then it comes with a V-pinch closing. So that's kind of the deer style. And the excuse I heard for why Case came with that option is because some guys, when they switch to the deer world, just can't let it go. That's all the better reason than you need, I guess. So there's an option. You might see it on Big Iron or something like that. It's not a good deal. But how that works, that flat profile, you have to have the flat profile for this V-pinch because we talked about the compaction of the seed trench. versus loose soil. If you have a reduced inner diameter, you left that soil really loose there, the V-pinch comes through and just mushrooms it out because it's so soft. Our reduced inner diameter leaves that soil loose. The two disc closing just zips it shut. It's just zipping it shut is all it's doing. You put our closing disc style with the flat profile, it's probably not gonna be able to close it because you just pack that soil. Now you can't zip it, and you can bring in dry dirt into the trench too because you've already firmed it. When that's loose, you're just zipping it shut. All right, closing system. So basically the same design. I got the specs there. 8-inch is new on a 1200 series, 7.5-inch shot, 9-inch on the 2008 shot. And honestly, I was saying 8.5 shot up until yesterday, and then I found the spec and I reread it and looked again. And so anyway, but one of the things I see probably more on the 9-inch on the 2000 series is bearings starting to get loose or rough. So just because they're not worn down to spec, be checking all your bearings, make sure they're tight if they're getting rough. Might be something to look at doing ahead of time instead of when you're out in the field. Now on the 2000 series, that's the old original arm with pivot bushing and pin. Those were a very high wear item. Any of you guys that had them know they were not good. The later one is an update kit with an arm that has a bearing in it. So if you have the old style, there's kits available to update to the bearing. It's been an excellent improvement. The 1200 series, the main wear item, in my opinion, is that little pin there at the bottom of the spring. I would say that's an annual deal. Replace that pin every year. It's cheap. If you don't, it'll start wearing into that tube and the arm excessively. Do I worry about that wear? Not really, but you are losing a little bit of your closing force just because you're egging that hole out. So replace that pin regularly to keep wear. There is a pivot bearing in it. They've been pretty reliable, but be watching if they flop side to side excessively. Need to replace that ball bearing up there. There's plenty of notched options, aftermarket options. Like I said, a lot of times it's on the 1200 series where guys need it. And sometimes, like I said, it's because they're nosediving the row unit. If the row unit was tipped back like it needed to be, it might have closed just fine. 2000 series, when I did the Atkinson Clinic, I left this slide out because we don't have rocks. And then I had guys from South Dakota there, and they wanted to see this option. So I had it back in. I don't think you guys really have rocks around here, but just in case one of you does. It's a different arm for the closing disc on the 2000 series to help with rocks. So if you have concerns or issues with that, there's a kit that's ordered through Whole Goods that can help with that. So let someone know if that is a concern. I don't know that it helps with concrete because concrete's odd shaped. It's going to get stuck no matter what. Just don't farm concrete. It's easy, right?
You spread it in your field.
Yeah. If you hit it hard enough, concrete will break. The rocks don't. I know. There are some setting adjustments that can be done on the closing to help with rocks. I think it's just kind of a little band-aid to help. Depth adjustment. So anyone that's ran 1200 series is familiar with this little slide scale. When we zero it out, we're loosening those screws and moving that slide. When we're zeroing it out, we're verifying that all the rows on the planter are the same depth. 2000 series, your depth adjustment is that handle, much easier. Main thing I want to point out is watch the bevel and the handle. That makes an 1/8 inch difference between bevel back and bevel forward. So make sure, it doesn't matter where you're at, make sure all the rows are the same though. So that way you're not an 1/8 inch variance across the rows. Zeroing out the 2100 series, it takes a little bit more. You gotta have a special tool to reach in the center. You're adjusting this set screw on this depth control linkage. I strongly recommend zeroing your planter, 1200 or 2000 series, anytime you change opener blades. It's a little bit of a project, but you want to verify that all the rows are the same. I just talked about taking all your gauge wheels off. You don't get them back on the same row. Things aren't worn the same. Make sure your depth is the same. Now, in Atkinson, we typically set them on concrete, zero them out there, set them so all the rows are flat on concrete. There are companies that make options like that set and seed tool where you put on a floor jack and it's got different ways of zeroing those rows out, but I strongly recommend doing it every time you put openers on. On the 2000 series, if you have you'll have a load cell on there. Those load cells are what's measuring your gauge wheel contact. That's this little piece right here, and those do go bad occasionally, and it is a replaceable item. So that's that whole depth control linkage. It looks pretty similar to depth control linkage on a 1200 series. It's just got the threaded adjuster. If you have a load cell on there, it's a little tiny pancake sensor that sits at the back of it. It's real easy to change. It's just sandwiched between that little handle and the row unit frame. Those were really known for failure, but luckily they're easy to change. To run that on that 1200 series row unit, you'd have to have it on a 2020 monitor. That is the load cell there that he is holding up for the 2000 series. If you have a load cell fail on these, you're not down and out. You can ignore it and move, and it'll run off the other rows. So that is one electrical component on these planters that you can run without. Just next rainy day, get it changed, especially if you get multiple of them, which is fairly rare.